Good evening once again and welcome to Doctor and Core. Well, last week we did say to you that we will be having a very special program. This evening is World Diabetes Day, and this evening we have three guests with us. Of course, one of the guests is no stranger to the program. He's been here on numerous occasions, and he will be back many more times. I'm talking about Dr. Francis Martin. Of course, everyone knows him. Also with us, Dr. Livingstone Fraser and Miss Liselle Toussaint, and we'll be chatting with them tonight. Of course, the discussion surrounding World Diabetes Day, and of course, we'll talk about the condition as well. So it is a good time to welcome our guests. Dr. Martin, good evening and welcome back.
Thank you, Godfrey. It's always a pleasure to be on the program to share information.
Yes, indeed. It's been a while, so I'm quite happy to have you. Dr. Fraser, good evening. How are you, sir?
Hello, good evening. Thank you. I'm fine, thanks. I'm very delighted to be here this afternoon to share.
All right, wonderful. And of course, Miss Liselle Toussaint, you always leave the best for last. The lady in the meads, so definitely. Mr. Toussaint, good evening and welcome to Doctor and Cole.
Good afternoon, sir, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, lovely. Of course, we also welcome our viewers on GBN Television 7 and 11, our listeners on K105 FM, and of course our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So as I said, tonight we're talking diabetes again. Last week we started the discussion. We focused a bit on the Grenada Diabetic Association, and tonight we're going to look more into the condition. All right, so I'm going to start with Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin, is World Diabetes Day, and of course we know a lot of emphasis is placed on that day. In fact, today I got some correspondence from CAFA, and of course outlining a number of things and some initiatives. One of the things that struck me though was the number of people in the Caribbean that have that condition, diabetes. Dr. Martin, let's talk a little bit about World Diabetes Day, its significance, and then we'll get more into the condition.
All right. Well, first of all, Godfrey, as a public health practitioner, I hate days. I do not like days. Days only benefit one group of people. Mm-hmm. Days benefit those who support treatment, those who want to highlight testing. Days, the proper public health approach to any epidemic or any situation that has very significant public health implications and social implications, there should be a graduated, sustained response to it. And it should not come down to a day. Days, to me, makes, the patients already benefit from days. So that's my overall opinion, my public health opinion on the matter of days. But that being said, I do understand the spirit in which these days occur and why we need to do it, because there are some very important information that persons need to be aware of. The prevalence of diabetes, or prevalence meaning the amount of persons with diabetes, is growing every year. The complications of diabetes have very significant social implications on family members and communities. The cost of treatment and the complications thereof of treatment. In fact, one of the complications of diabetes, small countries like Grenada actually cannot afford to take care of it. In fact, one guy says that small island developing states, they will outrun their ability to treat those chronic diseases if we continue on the path in which we are going. So the announcement by CAFA / WHO does not surprise me. What is very concerning to me, though, is the percentage of those that is found in the Caribbean and the Latin American countries. We are disproportionately affected by diabetes compared to the rest of the world, and one really needs to look into why this is. And so, if this World Diabetes Day, or if this highlight, if it helps to countries like us to put policies in place place to have a sustained response to diabetes, yes, I'm all for it. But if these days are simply just to highlight testing and to highlight treatment and to highlight complication, then we have failed in our public health response to diabetes.
Right. I am with you there. And as you said, I do understand, the reasoning behind, the day and so. I guess maybe just to raise awareness of the situation, and of course the bigger picture here is to address it and ensure that that condition does not continue to spread. The education is so very important, especially among our young people, get them to understand, because I can recall as a young boy growing up, when you heard about conditions like diabetes, it is a condition among the elderly. Now, so many young people, and I've come across many young people who are diabetics, and it is concerning. So we have to address it. As you said, we need to understand why so many of our people are diabetic, and of course come up with the ways of addressing it and ensuring that it does not continue. Let's bring in Dr. Fraser. Dr. Fraser, before we start, just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do.
Okay, good evening again. So my name is Livingston Fraser. I'm from Lamont, St. George's, right? I'm Grenadian, born and bred Grenadian. I'm a young medical doctor, just fresh in the fraternity, general practitioner. I work at the General Hospital at the orthopedics department. Also, I'm a young person living with diabetes as well for about approximately more than 20 years. Also, a part of the Grenada Diabetes Association. I volunteer, and we're trying to get the youth group or the youth going for the Grenada Diabetes Association.
Okay, wonderful. A young person, a young doctor living with diabetes for over 20 years. When you hear that, you start thinking, and of course we know that there are many reasons or why someone can become diabetic, not just lifestyle, but also there is the genetic aspect of things. Let's just talk a little bit about that, Dr. Fraser. Diabetes and your condition. Share with us some of the experience that you've had over the years.
Okay, so first of all, I was diagnosed when I was about 10 years old.
10 years.
And yes, about 32. I took my birthday last Thursday. So I took 32 years old. So that, as I said, was about 20 years ago. So that experience, I had the typical symptoms of diabetes in terms of frequent urination. I was eating a lot, getting hungry and still want to eat again. Right, together with the frequent urination, I was drinking a lot of water, going to the bathroom very regular. Right, and these were the main symptoms that I exhibited. One thing though, I have a very strong genetic hereditary, because both my mother and my father were diabetics. Right, they both passed away now. But so from that, went to the doctor, get checked up and so, and I was diagnosed at that age. And from then on, I knew I had diabetes, known as juvenile diabetes or type 1 or so, insulin dependent. Since I was diagnosed, I've been on insulin or so, and I receive many form of treatment in terms of education, in terms of nutritional wise, even the family psychosocial, coverage as well. I would not say that I was all good and dandy. I still had some form of what you call delinquency during my period, and And sometimes, to be honest, up to recently, it's still a fight, because living with diabetes is an everyday role that you have to manage. You cannot let go. And a lot of the time, most of us let go on certain times. But this is something that some people, when they get diagnosed, it's a death sentence. And so I just want to say it's not a death sentence. It's something that can be controlled. For some people, it can be reversed or so forth. It's something that to help you motivate for persons to move forward in their lives and their health. And so, yeah.
Dr. Fraser, I want to put you on the spot here. Was it your condition? I mean, you said you were diagnosed at around 10 years old, and of course you've had to grow and all the challenges involved. Was it that pushed you to become a medical doctor?
Yes, I think that was one of the. That was one of the. Let's say factors that pushed me to be a medical doctor. Well, I could give you a joke. My mom wanted me to be a pastor, but I decided I just wanted to be, on the medical side. I save people's lives in a next way.
All right. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Fraser. Let's just go to Mr. Saint. Tell us a little bit about you before we start chatting again. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good night once again to everybody. My name is Lisel Toussaint. I am a teacher by profession. I am attached to the Holy Spirit Catholic School, Shantimel RC. I've been living with diabetes for the past 23 years. I was diagnosed at the age of 10. Just like Mr. Fraser said, I started having the symptoms: frequent urination, significant weight loss, severe thirst, and extreme fatigue. I remember though that's something that's etched in my memory. My classroom teacher at the time, I was in grade 6, and he thought that I was doing it on purpose, the constant asking to go to the bathroom. So there was this day, he said, no, you're not going to the bathroom. And I had to do it right there. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I guess it was lack of education on the disease. And my parents, they took me to the doctor, and then I was diagnosed at the age of 10. Mm-hmm. And similar to Mr. Fraser, my mother had diabetes. She actually had gestational diabetes in making me. Mm-hmm. So it's safe to say that it's hereditary on my part, because my grandmother also had it.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Dr. Martin, you're listening to these two young persons. What's been going through your mind there?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of diabetes. That's the one that takes more of my emotional and professional self, because these are persons who, for want of a better term, were not doing anything abnormal. Mm-hmm. And genetically they managed to contract or genetically managed to develop the disease. So you can pretty much say they were born with a loaded gun, and that gun unfortunately was discharged. There's lots of understanding as to why this may happen. But by and large is an area that needs a lot more research in understanding what these persons are going through. And what is more interesting is that for persons who have type 1 diabetes very early, if they're not very careful, the outcome for them can be a lot more devastating than persons who develop diabetes late in their lives. So my heart really goes out to them. Because there is nothing much that they can do. I mean, the whole modernization on the technology, genetic technology that is available in the world, I suppose could deal with that as well. But my heart really does go out to type 1 diabetes But the interesting thing in our society is that the majority of people in diabetes is not type 1. And I think this is where medicine, for people who don't have a choice in the matter, we are here for that. The majority of persons are the type 2 diabetes, and that's the one that I have real serious problems with because it is preventable, it is reversible, and unfortunately, most of our healthcare dollars are used to manage those persons who have that preventable disease, and less of our healthcare dollars is used to manage those 2 young diabetics who did not have a choice in the matter. So the public health response should be reversed, if you know what I mean. But, it is the kind of life that we live.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's just backtrack a bit, Dr. Martin. Type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, it has come up. Let's talk a little bit more about the condition, diabetes, diabetes mellitus, as it is called. Let's just make that differentiation, type 1 and type 2, and then we'll take it from there.
Right. So we have an organ in us called the pancreas, and one of the main reasons the use of the pancreas is to make insulin. And insulin is used to help bring our blood sugar down. Now, the way I like to describe it is that the blood sugar in the bloodstream is like a child. The cells of our body is like your house. Insulin is the parent of that child. To get that child into the house, the parent has to hold that child's hand and take them across the door into the house. Literally, that is how insulin functions. Insulin is in the bloodstream. It takes the blood sugar by the hand, the blood glucose by the hand, and carries it into the cell so that the blood sugar in the bloodstream goes down or stay at a normal rate. Type 1 diabetes, unfortunately, is a situation where the mother is not present. The house is there, the child is there, but no parents to take that child across into the house. So that blood sugar or child remains in the street, or the blood sugar remains in the bloodstream. That's type 1 diabetes. And it may be on different levels. It may not be that the parent is absent and can't take the child across the street. It may just mean that the parent is weak or feeble or can't do the thing properly. So that's the type 1 diabetes. And that's a simple way of explaining what type 1 diabetes is. Type 2 diabetes is a situation where the parents is there. The parents is there trying to hold the child's hand, trying to take the child across the cells into the house, but the house is resisting it. The house doesn't want the glucose to come in. So it's called insulin-resistant diabetes. And there's a long gamut of what could be. It may be total insulin resistance or not at all. So one of it is the absence of the parents. The others is the parents being there. That's the type 2. But there's a resistance of us allowing the parent to bring the child across into the house. In other words, something is resisting the insulin from taking that blood sugar into the cells. I hope that helped to explain.
Right. And of course, when these situations do occur, it affects the individual's health. So let's talk about that. How does it affect the health of an individual who is going through something like this?
Well, ultimately, it affects every single organ in that individual on different levels and different stages. But there is a common mechanism that the diabetes uses to create that injury or create that damage in the body's cells. Diabetes creates a problem by interfering with blood flow. It interferes with blood flow. And the way it interferes with blood flow, again, I like to use analogies. If you have a nice, smooth bloodstream, you can I liken a nice smooth bloodstream as a nice paved piece of road, so that you could drive down that piece of road with no fear. You can drive freely down that piece of road with no fear because the road is nicely paved. Or when our bloodstream is nicely surfaced and nothing is interfering with the surface of the bloodstream, the blood can flow nice and good. Diabetes interferes with the lining of the bloodstream. In other words, diabetes comes out and put potholes in the road in the night.
All right. Right.
That's the simple way to put it.
I like that. I like that because you're giving me some questions.
So, as you can imagine, when there's potholes in the road, the vehicle cannot flow smoothly. Mm-hmm. And so, when things like cholesterol is growing through your bloodstream, the cholesterol is like a vehicle. They get trapped in those holes. When your blood vessels are going through, they get trapped in those holes. And before you know it, the cholesterol starts producing plaques, which is like a buildup of dirt and a buildup of thing, all because of that initial injury that was in the blood vessel. Mm-hmm. And that's what leads to the strokes and the heart attack and so on. And so, any organ that has a blood vessel in it can potentially be affected by diabetes. Mm-hmm. And any system in your body that requires good blood flow could also be affected by diabetes, because diabetes interferes with the blood flow, the flow of the traffic in the street.
Right. We've also heard about the term pre-diabetes.
Right. Well, pre-diabetes is a term that is used to gauge someone's risk or to gauge someone's chances of becoming diabetes. And what we do for that, we use a special blood test called the HbA1c or the hemoglobin A1c. And there are some specific numbers that you have to you have to have in your head. Now, for want of a simple explanation, if you're not diabetic at all, your HbA1c, let's say, should be between 4 and 5%. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are pre-diabetic, you might get an HbA1c between 5 and 6 per se, okay? But if you're diabetic, then we expect your HbA1c to be called a controlled diabetic. You have to have an HbA1c of, let's say, between 7 and 8. And above 8 is considered an uncontrolled. Now, the term pre-diabetic has a very good significance, and that is, it helps the individual to take on board and internalize the fact that if they don't take evasive actions, in 12 months, they can become diabetic. Mm-hmm. So it's an opportunity to have a reversal of a trend that may very well be. Now, if you know your parents, your aunts and uncles and cousins have diabetes, and you are not really in the pre-diabetic range, the writing is on the wall for you. You definitely know that you have to take evasive action. So I like the idea of pre-diabetic so that persons can gauge where they are. And I just want to put a plug in here for that particular individual. Tonight is not the night for that, but there are women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome that have on them evidence of insulin resistance. Even if they're not in a pre-diabetic range, those persons are women with polycystic ovarian syndrome should also internalize that it is a high possibility of them becoming diabetic later on, and should behave as a pre-diabetic and take evasive actions as well. Okay,
lovely. So, Doc, we've heard, and both Dr. Fraser and Lucille mentioned it earlier. They started the urge for wanting to urinate often, regular thirst. Lucille mentioned the weight loss and all of that, and some of the other symptoms. What about the condition that causes these symptoms? Or how does the condition create these symptoms for individuals who are diabetic?
Let me preempt this by saying, if individuals are waiting to see symptoms before they get themselves checked, you're already too late. I generally recommend that you do not wait until you get symptoms. You simply test your blood sugar. In other words, if Dr. Fraser's parents, knowing fully well that both of them are diabetic, if they had the presence of mind to check Dr. Fraser, they would have known long before 10 years old that his blood sugar was high and would have been able to take evasive action. So waiting to see symptoms is not the best. But let me go on and say why this happens. Now, sugar is kind of like salt, if you want to put it that way. You know, when you put salt on the table in the day and you leave it out in the open, it absorbs water.
Yes.
And it gets wet. To a certain extent, sugar is like that as well. It tends to grab water with it. Now, when you have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream, it is not the best for your body. Your body uses as much sugar as it can and converts it into fat but also the kidney has to flush out the extra sugar that is in your body that is not being able to use. In the kidney trying to flush out the sugar, what follows sugar? Water. So water comes with it. And because of the fact that they're losing too much water unnecessarily, then the body goes into thirst because your blood pressure starts to go down and your brain starts to worry about the amount of blood water in your system. And that creates the thirst. Dr. Fraser, I don't know if you remembered in the pre-modern days of in the old days of medicine, diabetes was diagnosed by tasting the urine. In fact, they first saw
I remember
ants following the urine of persons and realized, so there's a lot of sugar in the kidneys, and that's what caused the increased urination and thereby creating thirst.
Right. Then the weight loss. Is it the similar kind of procedure that happens or situation that occurs?
Right. You lose a lot of water, and that can lead to weight loss. But also, your body do not get the appropriate nutrition that it needs, because all of physiology in our body is all connected. The sugar that we eat is used to produce fat and to store fat under your skin. It is also used for your energy of your brain. And so your general health condition suffers as a result of the increased blood sugar in the body. So you're eating the food, but your body is not able to absorb the amount of nutrition from it simply because the organs are malfunctioning due to the increased sugar.
Okay. Let's bring in Lisel here. Lisel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Right. So over the years of being diabetic and so, how have you been able to manage it? Because I know it can be challenging. Dr. Fraser did mention it. Sometimes you kind of give in, as he said. But how has it been for you? Living with it, being able to manage and keeping yourself. You said you're a teacher, so that will take quite a bit of you having to deal with children, to teach. You have to prepare. So there is a lot. How have you been able to manage the condition over the years?
Okay, to be honest with you, it has been a roller coaster. Now, when I was much younger, I just used to live carefree, eat anything, not pay much attention to anything. I guess that it takes like something drastic happening to you for you to really, really start taking stock of your life.
Eye opener.
Right. So one time I was diagnosed with something called ketoacidosis. That's a condition, I guess the doctors, they'll explain it more for you. But it's basically your blood sugar, when your blood sugar is out of control for a long time, and it started having a negative effect on me. However, when I got the diagnosis though, the nurses and the doctors, they were scared because I was maybe 13 or 14, and they were scared because when they did my HbA1c, I believe it was 18 or 19, and it's supposed to be like below 7. And the numbers that they were getting for me, the machine was saying to them, call the doctor. So, and they said that their blood sugar machine at the time was like 600. It would read to be 600. Right. So my blood sugar levels was much, much higher than that. So they would have to test it in the lab. And they were scared because for some reason I was conscious. They said like most persons to that extent, they would be in a coma.
Okay.
So I think the fact that I was conscious and I was hearing what it is they were saying, that got to me. So I basically, after that, I would try, to control. And then you had the issue of, in previous times, the strips used to be so expensive. So we used to pay like at least about $5 or $6 for one blood strip to test. And so when you're supposed to be testing at least maybe 3 times a day, I probably used to test once a week to manage because I couldn't afford it.
Right.
So it has been really tough. However, as the years progressed, I guess with networking and stuff, it began to get easier. So I am able to test more often and try and manage and advocate for the younger ones. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, not wonderful, not the story. I don't mean the story. The fact that you've been able to, get through that and here you are today, all smiles and I'm sure you're at a point where you have more control of the condition now. Dr. Fraser, the same question to you. How have you been able to, and that is aside from being a medical doctor and probably having a lot more information and understanding it probably better than myself and Lisel. How have you been able to manage the condition over the years?
All right, so I think I share similar experience with Ms. Toussaint. Growing up, like in the earlier years of my diagnosis, it was very difficult to have that discipline because you're told you're supposed to stay away from certain foods, or at a younger age you just put sugar in your tea and then now you have to stop. So when no one is looking, you go and you put a spoon of sugar in your tea or whatever. And for the first few years it was very difficult in terms of getting that control, especially nutrition-wise. In terms of the medication-wise, at first, I don't know, I just got accustomed with the needles. I don't know. Compared to a lot of other people, they just had this thing against the needles. But I just had what you call an affinity for needles. So taking the medication wasn't that issue at that time. But there, at a point in time as well, there were some delinquency in terms of taking my medication. So growing up, coming along, when I actually met the Grenada Diabetes Association, back in the days, they used to have youth camp and used to have more gatherings for the younger ones and so. And I think it's through that network or society, I began to develop that discipline, right? And it was something necessary that I needed. And through time, I was getting better at it, right? I've been going back and forth, until even up to my university years. I think that was one of my best times where I had control. Having to study, having to take time to even do exercise. At the time where I was studying, they was giving me a diet, so no, I could just follow through, and that actually helped me throughout my time. Even now, I think my university years is much better than like recent times right now, but all in all, thank God for now. Well, thank God that I've been able to prevent any major complications or so forth in my life. Yep.
Dr. Fraser, being a medical doctor, I'm sure you've come across patients who are diabetic, and I don't know, you probably may have had to treat them or give some kind of advice and admonition to them. How has that been for you? Being a diabetic yourself and having to speak to people about the condition and the importance of taking care of themselves. How has that been for you?
Well, actually, I think it made it a bit easier, because sometimes when persons are newly diagnosed and they would find it difficult, probably to accept or see what's the way forward. Sometimes I found it easier to say, I'm a diabetic too, You know, and I think that would kind of make that connection a bit easier. And, just show them certain ways that they could go about it. And, you have that collective approach in terms of managing diabetes. Just give that little hope that, something good can still happen, right? It's not just a dead end and a dead sentence. So that actually gave for me, a little edge in terms of practicing medicine.
Right. Okay. So, Dr. Martin, I'm coming back to you. And you're the most experienced in dealing with that, and I'm sure you've helped many, many, many people to be able to be in a better place today as it relates to managing that condition. I know you're passionate about things like that, so I'm sure you have. But patients coming to you day after day, and having to continue. See, and I'm sure there are those that you find delinquent, and you might say, look, you need to do this and you need to do that, and they come back and you're not seeing the results that you would hope to. How is that for you, and how do you deal with patients like that, and I'm talking about maybe delinquent ones?
Right. Well, Godfrey, I do not use the word delinquent. I have never used it, and I will never use it. I always say to patients who are having difficulty, I will say, I understand what you're going through. Those of you who don't have to take a medication every day of your life, we could stand and preach all day long because we don't have to take it every day of our lives. Mm-hmm. It's not easy to take medicine every day of our lives. So I have never gotten annoyed, and I will never get annoyed with any patients who has not taken the medication. I show understanding because I know it is frustration, and it's frustration simply because sometimes it's a financial frustration because they don't have the money to get the medicines. Sometimes it's the way they feel. They really feel I don't know, I don't want to say disappointed, but some people are really distressed by their disease. Some of them have family issues or social issues that lead to them not taking the medication. So I do not call them delinquent. I've never done so, and I will do this. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see a patient who have difficulty sticking with their regimen, I switch my attention to understanding what they're going through. Is it a financial issue? Is it a sight issue? I have seen people that don't take their medication simply because their sight was bad and they had no relatives around them to help them take their insulin. There is always a reason, and the reason is either a social reason, a financial reason, or an emotional reason. There may be other reasons. And once I figure out what that reason is, then I focus on it. I do a lot of sacrificing, so I give my number to a lot of them and I say, call me twice a day, text me in the morning, text me in the evening, text me how you're feeling. Are you having problems with your medication? And so my focus has always been to switch my approach, take off my doctor's hat and put on a normal, human, collegial citizen's hat. And I have found that is what made the difference for them.
Excellent. Excellent. You've just made me feel extremely guilty for using the word. I feel very bad using the word delinquent, Dr. Martin. I apologize. I apologize for that. I have to.
I'm the first one that used the word delinquent, so it's not all your fault.
No, but what Dr. Martin has said, it really makes sense, and it is, in my opinion, an excellent way to help people to better manage. Sometimes when you deal with individuals in a particular way, probably not understanding the reasoning behind it, you're probably putting a little more pressure on them than is deserving. So I apologize, and I would try my very best not to use words like that again, but to think about what Dr. Martin has said, and not just with situations like that, but in other situations. I think it might just help. So I want to come back to Lisel again. Lisel, in terms of support, because having a condition like that, an individual by themselves, it can be challenging. So in terms of support, friends, family, at work, how is it for you? And does this environment help you or make it a little more difficult for you?
Okay, so from the very start, I've always had support.
Okay.
My family, they're the best. They have always been there. They still is. And my work, they're very supportive. Friends, everybody. Man, the support is overwhelming. So before I have a headache, everyone is on, what's wrong? Is it your blood sugar? Like, what's happening? So I have a good support system, and I would say I think though, like, those in my circle, they understand the condition. Dr. Fraser, I heard you said earlier that you would normally say to a patient that I'm diabetic as well. Now, I don't like the phrase I'm diabetic. Maybe because I'm studying special education, right? I prefer the term I'm someone living with diabetes. I think saying that you're diabetic, it puts a negative note towards it, especially like persons like with a chronic condition or a disability. So the persons around me, I made sure to they're educated. So they know, this is my condition, this is what I go through. There are times I get very depressed, and I must say they don't leave me to thrive in my depression. There are times I'm just tired. I'm just simply tired because, as Dr. Martin said, it's a constant fight every day. Right now, I have a confession. I am off my insulin pump because I'm just tired. I'm back to injections because I'm tired of the rotation of the sites and stuff like that. And the persons in my support system, they would be there and they would be like, we know that you're tired, but you have to fight. Mm-hmm. So having a good support system is very important for any person living with a chronic disease, any person living with an illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Martin, it looks as if I'm in for it tonight. I'm saying all the wrong things. I now have to stop saying diabetic.
It's not your fault, Godfrey. It's a societal issue.
Yeah. But I'm in the hot seat. I'm putting the questions here, and it's coming back at me. But we all learn, and the thing is, I'm happy because it helps you. It helps you, and you know how to deal with things, different situations. So yes, indeed, it does help. But Dr. Martin, let me come to you again in terms of and I want to sort of broaden the discussion. We know that in every health system, every health sector, there are challenges. Been in the system for many years at your level, are we making progress in dealing with, and I'm going to generalize here, chronic conditions?
We've had some ups and downs, I should say. Generally, we're on an upward trajectory, generally. We've had some ups and downs. I think over the last 20 years of practicing medicine, I have been able to see trends. One of the trends is an increase in the prevalence or increase in the numbers of persons who have diabetes. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. It may simply be that because we are more educated now, we're doing more education now, people are becoming more aware, we're testing more, so we're picking up more. So the increase in the numbers does not necessarily mean that the situation is worsening. It just probably means that we are responding better from a public health standpoint to our diabetes persons. So yeah, that's an issue. I think we have a better understanding also as to why some things are happening, and that is because we have done many things, including our community profiles and so on. I recall in a very particular community once, we had very difficult persons with diabetes, and we were able to run a community profile to see why these people were so uncontrolled, and we got very valuable information. It had to do with their own understanding. It had to do with their socioeconomic statuses. It has to do with their gender. It has to do with the health system's response to them. So those are things that we were able to do over the years. I think the organizing of the diabetic associations and the chronic disease clinics and so on, those are very good avenues for that kind of a sustained response to the diabetes. So I am happy with that response, right? What I am not happy with, though, is the complications that I've seen of diabetes over the years. I still believe that the prevalence and the incidence of complications due to diabetes is still unacceptably high. I believe that amputations should we should address amputations, and that's not just Grenada. Over the years, different islands were termed the amputation capital. Even Barbados was termed the amputation capital at one point in time. So that is a concern to me. Dialysis is also a concern to me. The fact that we're more and more people are being pushed into the dialysis is a very significant concern. And may I say here, and I want us to understand this in very serious terms. Countries, small island developing states like Grenada, from a public health standpoint, will never be able to totally afford dialysis. Let me just put that out there. So if people are thinking that there's this magic wand that you can pass and dialysis will solve all the problem, that is not going to happen. In fact, there is data to suggest that even if you're on dialysis, your life expectancy is still significantly shorter in small island developing states compared to the bigger islands. So dialysis is not the solution to the problem, right? I still think we need to focus on prevention and screening and prevention, primary prevention and secondary prevention. That part, I think we're losing the battle on. So I think we're losing the battle on prevention. I think early screening, primary prevention, and so on, because early screening and primary prevention is linked to so many social issues, so many trade issues, so many gender issues, that screening that we need and that prevention of diabetes onset, that is where I think we have a lot of work to do.
So are we also failing in raising enough awareness? I mean, like educating people, putting the word out there so people can understand. You said earlier, you mentioned earlier in a community profile, there were people who clearly didn't understand. So should we be doing more of that, going out there and educating people, get them to understand what it is and how it can be prevented and so on and so forth?
This is absolutely necessary. There is no end to that. That's sustained. When I say about sustained response, that is one of the sustained response that you must do. I mean, a lot more people are aware, but a lot more needs to be aware. And you need to repeat, because repetition is the key to learning. People do forget things after a while. So we need to keep pushing the education, pushing the prevention, giving people the opportunity to be able to help their own selves in the diabetic situations. A lot of the times, even as healthcare providers, we kind of talk down to people and say, you should eat this, you should eat that, you shouldn't do this. But we don't know that the only thing the man has at home is planting. We don't know what the situation at home is. And so telling him to do X, Y, Z, he hears it, but he can't do it because of his social circumstance. So the education needs to continue, and not just education on a patient standpoint as well, but education on a healthcare provider standpoint as well. Healthcare providers need to become more a partner with their patients rather than talking down to their patients and saying, here is this pill, take it. but you have to go sit in the trenches with them and understand what they're going through to be able to help them adequately. So yes, that education, that whole involvement, we still need that patient-centered involvement that I'm talking about. Still needs some work to be done.
Okay, wonderful. Doc, we take a short break. When we come back, a couple more questions. Then we'll open our telephone lines to our listeners and viewers to take any questions or comments. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Your life is yours. Your future's in your hands. Your body is yours. That's why you need a plan. You gotta plan your family, avoid HIV, get the education from the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
We offer STI screening, gender-based violence counseling, prenatal and postnatal checks, injectables, condoms, pap smears, and other sexual reproductive services. Open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Pointe Street, St. George's. Whether male or female, it doesn't matter. We're here to make your life better.
Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
For appointments, call 440-3341.
There was ever a time to keep and stay healthy, it's now. We at Hills and Valley are here to help you take deliberate steps to maintain your health. We stayed true to maintaining the most comprehensive rates while stocking the widest range of medicines and health devices, including personal protective equipment. There are so many benefits shopping with us. You get great savings through discounts for senior citizens and reward cards for loyal customers. Ask about owning yours today. Visit us at Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George, Jubilee Street opposite the Grenville Bus Terminal, and at Hillsborough, Carrico. Our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street also stocks the widest range of pharmaceuticals. We are with you on the hills and in the valleys. We are Hills and Valley Pharmacy.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Blast Gaming is where dreams come true and jackpots are won. Dive into a world of delightful experiences and daring action. From the moment you step through the doors, have the time of your life, feel the energy, soak in the excitement, and let the good times roll. Blast is more than just a place to play. It's where friends socialize, cocktails flow, and a safe space for those who dream big and dare to have fun while doing it. Blast Gaming. Know your limit, play within it. You must be 18 and over.
Do you have muscular...
Welcome back, everyone. It's Dr. on Call, and in case you joined the slate, it's World Diabetes Day, and we're talking diabetes. Dr. Francis Martin is with us, also Dr. Livingston Fraser and Miss Lucille Toussaint. They're with us, sharing quite a lot of valuable information. Dr. Martin, let me come back, and I want us to quickly touch on... Well, we've talked a bit about the symptoms, and so let's talk a little bit about the diagnosis and what follows.
Well, again, I want to plug in here that persons should not wait until they become symptomatic or have symptoms. They should do their routine check. When a person is diagnosed with diabetes, the healthcare provider may do one or two measurements to gauge where he is. And one of the measurements is the HbA1c that you hear talking about all along. That's a very great indicator as to what you could do. So, for example, if someone has an HbA1c of between 7 and 8, I will sit with them and have a frank discussion as to what you want to do with this. Where do you want to go with this? Because you're right here. I don't give them a tablet. I said, let's sit and say, what do you want to do about this? Even if they're between 8 and 10, I still sit and say, what do you want to do about this? Are there any things in your life that we can adjust? And almost always there are things that they can adjust. Then we have a general discussion on the foods that you eat. And I like to use a slang that says, in terms of the food you eat, I have a slang that says that health resonates with them well. And it says, white things is not good for black people. So white foods is not good for black people. So the white rice, white flour, white pasta, white potato. White things not good for black people. Right. So that's a nice little easy way of helping them to understand choices that they're going to make. And we set ourselves targets. I would say, okay, let's do this. Do we want to do it in 3 weeks or do we want to do it in 6 weeks? We set that target, and invariably they will come back to me and we make a discussion, where do we want to go? I would use some other measurements as well. If they have very high blood pressures, or they have very high cholesterol tests, or their HbA1c is way past 10, I would say to them, I like taking the conservative road, but I think you're too much of a risk factor right now. Too much things are going bad. So can we use a medicine to knock the thing down to get you to where you want you to be, and then you can take over on your own? That's the kind of discussion that I have with them. And thereafter, the follow-up depends on if they have kidney issues or heart issues or whatever thereafter. That's what I do when I meet someone who's diabetic. This, to me, is called the patient-centered approach. That means the patient gets to decide what they want to do about the conditions that they face.
Right. Dr. Fraser, coming here. Anything you want to add with what Dr. Martin just said? I think you're still muted. Right.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so I do certainly agree with what Dr. Francis Martin mentioned about the diagnosis, the HbA1c, and also the blood sugar levels. So, as he said, a person living with diabetes, they are the ones managing on a daily basis. So, you can give someone a tablet, or you can tell them go take insulin, and that's it. But this is where the education comes in, and the patient, or we would have to take that conscious effort. Okay, in 6 months' time, in 6 weeks' time, we want to reach at this level, or we want to reach at that level. And I think that it's a great approach to it, It's a great approach. And then the patient wouldn't entirely say that, I don't understand what's going on, and stuff like that. So getting the patient involved in the management is very crucial, very crucial.
Okay, wonderful. Lisselle, in managing your condition, I want to talk a little bit with you about your diet. Of course, food is wonderful. It brings joy. When you eat, you feel good, but you've had to make some adjustments. You have to portion and all of that. How easy it is for you, or have you gotten to the point where this is not a big deal anymore, I can manage it well, I have it under control?
Well, to be honest with you, education comes in right here again. For a lot of years, I used to think, okay, I could eat whatever as long as it does not taste sweet, then I could have it. But that isn't true. So you have to eat the correct amount of portions, and you have to adjust your insulin, your medications. For what you eat, you have to exercise. Now, eating healthy in Grenada, I must say, it's very, very expensive. It's not easy to be on the strict diet which you're supposed to follow. Because it's very easy for you to go to the shop and buy a pound of rice than to go to the shop and buy some provision. The provision would be 2 or 3 times the cost of the rice. So I must say that I try, but I cannot say that, okay, I have it under control, but I do what I can. When I can, to the best of my ability.
Okay, wonderful indeed. We're going to come back, but for listeners, our telephone line is open. The number is 435-2041. You have any questions, you can give us a call, and you get in on the program. Dr. Martin, you want to say something? Yes.
I really want to put a charge in here before we open the lines about 2 things or 2.5 things that I really want to mention. I'm not so sure that people are aware that diabetics have twice time the chance of developing pancreatic cancer and liver cancer. I am not aware that people know that. If you have diabetes,
I'm in it for the first time.
Yeah, if you have diabetes, you run twice the chance that you can develop liver cancer and pancreatic cancer. Also, if you have diabetes, you have a higher risk, not twice time, but a higher risk of developing bladder cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer. Thirdly, patients who are diabetic and have breast cancer have a much worse outcome than if they didn't have diabetes. So there is a very strong association with those major cancers and diabetes. And again, we need to add this to the national council of the conversation.
It's important.
About the increased risk. Yeah. That's the first thing I want to mention. The second thing I want to mention is, as I call it, let's not suffer in silence anymore. And I'm speaking to my men folk here. Diabetes has an interesting way of interfering with the erection of men. Long before diabetes starts showing its head in a very significant, remember I talked about diabetes being a problem with blood flow?
Yes.
And I used the analogy of the potholes in the road. Well, Godfrey, erection happens because blood needs to flow into the penis in a very smooth and clean blood vessels with no potholes in the road. If diabetes creates potholes in the road of the penis, the blood is not going to flow effectively. And so erectile dysfunction is a major problem with men and diabetes. And I'm very serious about this. These men we have to take matters into our own hands. Let's not suffer in silence anymore. Men, get your blood sugar tested, get your sugar under control, because at the end of the day, your erection is going to be a problem. So I want to put those two things in. The last thing I want to say before you open the phone line is what Lisel said. Lisel said, eating local is expensive. I have a strong feeling that someone is pushing that narrative. You remember the narrative that coconut oil was not good?
Yeah.
And it destroyed our copra industry in the Caribbean? You remember that narrative that avocado wasn't good?
Yes.
Yes. And now we know this is not true. Now somebody's pushing this narrative about eating local is expensive. I don't know where they got that from. Eating local is not expensive. Eating simple and local is not expensive, because anybody could get a grain of fig and blog and so on and cook, and yams and dashing and so on and cook. Everybody could get this. It's because they want to buy fancy things to put in it. Eating local is not expensive. And for those who insist that eating local is expensive, ask them what is the cost of dialysis. Dialysis will basically bankrupt you if you have diabetes. So I want us to change that language. We have to speak it into our minds, and so it comes into existence. That if you think eating local is expensive, then plant some food behind your house and so on. I'm not saying everybody could have a backyard, but the point is we have to stop saying that and really realize that eating healthy and local is an investment into our future. and stop saying that eating local is expensive.
Right. No. Two things you mentioned. Dialysis can send you bankrupt. I think you miss out something. It can send you bankrupt before you snap your fingers. I mean, I've heard about the cost of dialysis. So you snap your fingers and that's it. But I want to just go back to the first things you mentioned with the risk and so. People who are diabetic, they run the risk of pancreatic cancer and so on. Why is that so?
Well, I mean, the mechanism is still pretty much, close. Or those searches going into it. What usually happens in those type of data is that the collective data is just collected on the people who died from these cancers. Mm-hmm. And what they've noticed is that diabetes seems to be a common denominator in all of those persons when they count those numbers over the years. But I think it has to do all with the inflammatory markers that diabetes creates in our bodies, the free radicals that diabetes create, and the damage that those free radicals do to the general DNA in our bodies. So I am not fully much aware of the exact mechanism and how it happened. It's just that those were just trends that was determined by looking at the research numbers and looking at how things happen over the years.
Right. One other question quickly, and Dr. Martin or Dr. Fraser, you can take it. We've heard, many people talk about some of the home remedies for some of these conditions. In fact, someone on our Facebook page is saying the best thing to take for diabetes: cinnamon, breadfruit leaf, mango leaves, and papaya leaves. Dr. Fraser, Dr. Martin, you guys are the medical experts. You want to comment on this?
Dr. Fraser.
Okay, for me, what I think is I don't have a problem with like remedies, natural remedies. Actually, they can be quite useful, right? The issue is that persons are being diagnosed, right, with diabetes, and they would refuse to take, let's say, conventional medicine like the tablets or the insulin. They would go to the natural remedies and not monitor themselves. So they cannot come back and say, well, the natural remedies is working because I'm testing my sugar and it's give me good numbers, or I did my A1C 3 months or 6 months after and it's down because of that. So sometimes some persons use it as an excuse not to take medication, and in the long run they end up with kidney failure. It affects the liver and it affects a lot of the other organs because they haven't been checking up to see how it's going, Mm-hmm. Yep. That's
Dr.
my
Martin?
contribution.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Fraser, that has actually been my experience as well. A number of persons, when we had that discussion about, what you want to use natural remedies, I would say, yeah, let's do the natural remedies. But the discipline that they need to follow to see if the natural remedies is actually working, that is where they're faltering. So that has actually been my experience as well. And I just want to plug one in there. I kind of forgot to mention that, and a colleague of mine has just reminded me that one of the reasons why diabetes cancer is so prevalent, diabetes, is because cancer cells actually survive on sugar. And if there are more blood sugar in the bloodstream, that helps the cancer cells to survive. My friend who know who he is has just reminded me of that, mm-hmm. that in the presence of sugar, cancer cells survives. And so when you starve them, they actually starve as well. So in terms of the local remedies, I have had those patients that have used it. I encourage them to go ahead carefully. I check them carefully and so on. But I've had some experiences where the herbs didn't work, and that encouraged them to feel confident that we can now try a pharmaceutical tablet, and things all worked out well.
Mm-hmm. But one of the concerns I have about that, and I've asked a question before. Yes, you have the herbal medicines and so, but these things, they contain all different substances. How do you know what is good for you, or as compared to maybe something that is not good for you?
It's a very difficult question to answer. It's a very difficult question to answer, and I'm not a herbalist, so I can't really tell. But I believe that Western medicine is not the only source of cure in the world. Right. I don't believe that at all. I believe there are naturopathic means. I believe that there are spiritual means, there are oriental means, and other forms of healing. And so a naturally occurring drug or naturally occurring herb have been used successfully in the past. In fact, the pharmaceutical industry thrives on the fact that they were able to distill out those chemicals from the naturally occurring thing. What I do find is a general statement I have about naturally occurring healers, and that is nature is made in such a way that the herbs have a way of protecting itself from giving you the major side effects. Now, there are herbs who do have side effects, and we know that as well. But as a general rule, the herbs have built in itself the protective parameters to prevent you from getting sick and at the same time getting the benefit of the medication. People just need to be upfront and be cognizant and, just check yourself to make sure that the herbs is actually working. And if it is not working, do the human thing by switching over to a pharmaceutical meds.
Okay, wonderful. So, folks, the telephone line is open, 435-2041. If you have any questions that you would like to ask our doctors and also Lisel, you can do so. The number again, 435-2041. Give us a call. We'll be happy to hear from you, and of course, we'll try our best to provide you with the necessary answers. Just keep in mind that Dr. Fraser or Dr. Martin will be able to diagnose you on the program. It's sharing information. So if you call with a question, don't expect a miracle to work. We're sharing information. So let's go to the telephone. Doctor and call, good evening.
Good evening, Godfrey, and good evening to the goodly gentleman and the lady.
Yes, good evening, caller. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Godfrey. First of all, let me say amen to Dr. Martin on the issue of narratives. And secondly, let me say good evening to Dr. Lisel. Now listen, I am 70 plus, and for 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, I am active. I want to say active, I'm active. And I am not diabetic, I do not feel weak, I don't feel tired. I'm not saying I'm not human. Well, the point I'm getting at is that laziness is one of the key ingredients to destroy your life. So people must get up and get. Grenada is a very fertile place. So natural food should not be a problem. The only issue I see in Grenada, based on laziness, is that we run to the quick fix. So generally speaking, we become a nation of addicts. Quick fix, no for now. And that is where Dr. Martin came in with his idea and his philosophy that we need to be conscious in how we live, what we have around us, how we can utilize it, and make our lives, our daily living, economical. And we'll go forward. Now, in the reference to Dr. Lisel, where she said eating local is much more expensive than imported stuff. It is not true. It is perhaps your attitude towards going about living. And I'm telling you, we have natural, well, if you want to call it tree crops or fruits, vegetables, tree crops that are highly, highly nutritious, and it has, if you want to call it curative or ensuring good life endurance, but we pay little and no attention to them. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the narrative. Thank you. Continue on that path.
Thank you, caller. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Martin, you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, he simply, exonerate, and indicate why we are on the path that we are. We just need to keep, encouraging people to go along that way.
Okay. Very early, Lisel mentioned that she was diagnosed with a condition, diabetic ketoacidosis, and we were supposed to get an explanation for that. Doc, can you help us out here?
Right. You remember initially when I said sugar is used for our energy in our bodies. Mm-hmm. Sugar is like the child, and insulin is like the parent holding the hand of the child to go into the cells, because the cells are going into the house, because this is where you need the sugar to do its work. So with diabetes, because there is either a problem with the mother not being around or the insulin not being around in type 1 diabetes, or in type 2 diabetes where the insulin is around but there is a resistance to the use of the insulin, the cells starts to suffer. And because the cells starts to suffer because they're not getting the sugar as they want, the sugar is still in the bloodstream, it is not in the cells where they need it, the liver kicks in. And when the liver kicks in, it makes ketone bodies. And these are the name. I mean, there's a specific name for those ketone bodies, but for simplicity of conversation, the liver makes ketone bodies. And the ketone bodies is what the cells use for its energy in the absence of glucose. And that's why the ketone ends up in the urine, because your body needs something to survive. If they can't get glucose, they're going to find something else. And in this case, the liver has formed ketone bodies.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the telephone. We have a caller. Doctor and call, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes.
I would like to the doctor to explain to me what is type 2 and type 1 diabetes.
Okay, thank you, caller. Dr. Martin, I know we mentioned it earlier, but probably the caller joined us late. He wanted you to briefly explain type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so the basic explanation is type 1 diabetes, you need insulin because your pancreas is not producing insulin. Type 2 diabetes, you have insulin, but your body can't use it. I hope that is simple enough.
Right. Does that have anything to do with, some people when they do their numbers, the sugar is high and at some other times it's very low, which can result in diabetic comas and stuff like that?
Well, from the disease condition itself, yes, that could happen. But a lot of the times it happens because of problems with treatment. Either persons, those who are insulin, they can make mistakes with taking the insulin, and that can have the sugar to go dangerously low. Mm-hmm. Or those who are on tablets may have taken more tablets than they should or haven't eaten enough, and that can cause the blood sugar to go dangerously low. Or if they do not take the medicines or the insulin, the blood sugar gets dangerously high. So the high sugar and the low sugar leading to coma or other neurological problem is usually an issue related to the treatment. Okay. Either too much of it or too little of it.
Okay, I got you. 435-2041, that's the number you can call. Let's go back to the telephone. Doctor and call, good evening. Hello. Caller, can you turn the volume of your radio or your television down and listen to us on your telephone, please? Okay. So callers, when you call, it would be good if you turn the volume of your device down and listen to us on your telephone. If not, you won't hear us. All right, or you'd be hearing us delayed, and so there would be a period of quietness on the phone. So you call. Once the call is taken, turn the volume of your radio or TV down and listen to us on your telephone. Let's try again. Let's go back to our telephone. Doctor and call, good evening. Caller, can you turn the volume of your radio or TV down, please? Okay. 435-2041. Let's try again. In the meantime, Dr. Martin, we're getting close to wrap up time. So both yourself and Dr. Fraser, what advice would you give to people? And we're talking here about 1, prevention, and 2, living with diabetes.
Okay, can I go? All right, so there are different levels of prevention we can talk about, right? So you have the prevention of the onset of diabetes if you know you're at risk. And I think there are lots of programs out there that would assist you to know, to let you know what are your risk factors. For example, we spoke about hereditary genetics. We talking about lifestyle disease, obesity, and other chronic disease, for example, hypertension and so forth. So these are things that would assist persons to know where they're at in terms of risk factors, in terms of developing the condition of diabetes, right? So that's at that stage. Then you have to look at the persons that are already diagnosed with whichever diabetes, type 1 or type 2. How can they prevent complications, right? In some case of type 2, how they can reverse or how they can let themselves off medication through diet and just exercise, because there are people living with the conditions that they don't need medication to control. Diet, exercise, and so forth, and it's okay, and everything is under control. So these are things that people need to take in consideration. There are persons that will need the medication in terms of the tablet, the oral, or the insulin to keep things under control, together with diet and exercise as well. And you need support. You need support. We live in the information stage, right? There are lots of information out there. You go to the correct sources. You have WHO, you have the International Diabetes Federations, and you have a lot of other credible sources where you can educate yourself on your condition and where you are. Yeah.
Dr. Martin?
I usually end all my public talks and lectures with, how can we use our local situation to solve this problem? And I'll try to put it very simple. If we eliminate high glycemic food, or high glycemic index simply means the amount of sugar that your body gets out of it. Mm-hmm. If you eliminate those and concentrate on your middle and low glycemic index foods, you do much better. Very simple. High glycemic foods with high sugar in it is the sugary foods and the refined foods. You try to avoid those as much as possible. Your middle glycemic index foods are those that has, decent amount of sugars in it, are your brown foods. So your instead of white bread, you use whole wheat bread. So your brown foods, brown rice, your brown foods, those are really what you want to eat most of, together with your vegetables and so on. And those with very low glycemic index, in other words, you're least likely to get diabetes from those, it is a low glycemic index. And these are the foods under the ground. So your sweet potatoes, your yams, dasheen and tanya, that's what we want to eat. There's some food that we call them sugar-resistant foods. That means when you eat them, it does absolutely nothing to your blood sugar. The major one is fig and bulgur. Fig and bulgur does nothing to your blood sugar. Yams, dashins, and so on, they raise the blood sugar slowly in your body so your body can handle the blood sugar over time. The processed foods and the white foods, they raise the blood sugar so quickly in your body that your pancreas have to handle it. So the best way to end this whole session is for people to eat simple and local. Eat simple and local. And that's the best way to stop diabetes. Eat simple and local. Bulgur and fig.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we lost Lisel. I don't know if the internet is giving some problems, but nevertheless, oh no, she's there with us still. Here she is. Lisel, any final words you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap?
I would say to our listeners, do what you can to the best of your ability. If you can take preventative measures, then do so, because living with diabetes is not a nice thing. It's challenging. So do what you can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Take advice from the medical doctors and do what you can.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisel. It was indeed a pleasure chatting with you, and let me also encourage you to continue doing what you're doing in managing the condition, and I'm sure you'll live as long as you would like to. Yes, indeed. Dr. Martin, Dr. Fraser, it was indeed a pleasure having you all. I really enjoyed the discussion. I learned a few things. I learned that white foods are not good for black people. I like that, and I hope you can permit me to use it from time to time. I hope there's no copyright on that, Dr. Martin. I won't pretend it's mine, but at least I'd like to use it from time to time. I really like that.
Sure.
I really like that. I really like it. But it was indeed a pleasure. Dr. Fraser, also continue doing what you're doing, and keep that condition under control. Folks, we thank you very much for your contribution. We thank you for staying with us. Those of you on our Facebook page who contributed, thank you very much. And of course, the month of November, lots of awareness is raised on the condition. As Dr. Martin said earlier, even if you are on dialysis and you can afford it, there are still complications, especially in small island states like us. So be aware of these things. It's very important. Information is very, very important. When you have good information, use it well, and I'm sure you will reap benefits from it. So, Doc, thank you very much, and do enjoy the rest of the evening. It was indeed a pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Take care.
All the best. Yep. Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for this evening. It was indeed a pleasure again. Thank you for staying with us. And, of course, you can join us next Tuesday for another Doctor and Call. Just reminding you, tomorrow evening, our Climate Realities, episode 8 of season 2. Tomorrow we look at the impacts of climate change on education. Until then, to have a good night. All the best.